everybody, what is going on? So in this video, we're going to do a Q&A, but I brought my good friend DisneyFamilyman23, aka George, with me to answer your questions. Disney Family Man, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me. As we were saying before, it's been a while. It's been a long time. So
It's been a really long time. And for those of you that are not aware, I actually was on his channel yesterday with Vash Sky. We were discussing everything from alcohol at the parks, Disney Forward, a whole host of things. I'm going to link part 1 and part 2 at the end of this video. Make sure you check it out. It was an incredible conversation. And thanks again, George, for having us yesterday. That was a lot of fun, man.
Oh, absolutely. It was great. And I think it's so nice to have sort of like a roundtable discussion, that you get different aspects, with different people. You have different opinions, you have a different outlook on things. And sometimes you learn a thing or two and it's like, oh, I didn't think of that, but that's really cool.
Yeah, well, especially with Dre. Every time I have him on or I'm on a video with him, I always learn something new. He always brings a lot of interesting insight and fact to the discussion. He's pretty cool.
He definitely loves to dissect things down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. So we're going to go ahead. I asked my subscribers to submit a few questions, and we're going to go over each one. So let's get started. Give me one moment. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the first question here. All right, so this is from Edward Brandenburg. And Edward actually has been a subscriber of mine, George, since like the very beginning.
Oh,
and,
wow. So
yeah,
this is an OG.
This is an OG. And he actually early on was very critical of my work. And I appreciated him because he helped me become a better content creator. Like he would tell me like in the comments, like, hey, that video wasn't that good, or you repeated yourself or whatever. But he's been with me and I appreciated early on his constructive criticism and everything. So yeah,
yes.
Pretty awesome.
Well, Edward, thank you for the question, and definitely come on over to DisneyFamilyman23. Check out my channel. I'm definitely up for constructive criticism. You guide me in that direction, brother.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. So Edward is asking, how do you think Disney will/should resolve Universal having 2 Disney IP, The Simpsons and Marvel, in their parks? So what are your thoughts on that, George? What do you think Disney's going to do about this?
Well, I definitely think it's a very, again, very great question, because I have thought about this from time to time, like anytime any of those franchises come up. And it's definitely a sticky situation. More so primarily with Marvel. I think when it comes time for The Simpsons, I think with Disney already owning Fox and owning those rights to that notion where they could maybe, strike a deal, as far as like with the Simpsons go. Because as far as I know, in Universal, it's just that one little area with one attraction where they kind of made Springfield or what have you. And now that's also to the fact if Disney wants to have the Simpsons franchise in the parks, and that's another sticky situation there. Yep. Because I think if you kind of have, Mickey Mouse rubbing elbows with Bart Simpson, I mean, it's kind of like
it's weird.
Yeah. So I think if they were to have the Simpsons in a Disney park, I think it would primarily fit in like Hollywood Studios or even DCA, even though that's like a California themed park, but it still is, The Simpsons was made for, it was the #1 primetime show that, and it still, hits a lot of records, since its conception back in 1989 when it premiered with the Christmas special. And now that it's on Disney Plus, and, so if Disney wants to incorporate it in the parks, I think that's where it would go. But I think it's more so very sticky with Marvel, because it's one of those things that they could have certain Marvel characters at the Florida parks. They're pretty much somewhat good to go, in California. But it's also the fact of competition. And, we were talking about with Avengers Campus and what have you. And I was also having this discussion on my podcast, the Grand Circle Tour podcast. And it's one of those things where, you know, especially when it comes to Spider-Man, you're now having competition with Universal, because that Spider-Man attraction, since it opened in the year 2000,
Right.
it broke a lot of records with, you know, technology, and won a lot of awards. And now when you kind of look at this type of Spider-Man ride that Disney is making, it's like, well, it just seems like a Buzz Lightyear blaster ride rethemed with Spider-Man, you know. So what is going to give it that unique appeal that's going to drive people to, you know, that attraction? So I think Disney definitely has, they're dealing with a situation where they have to compete, but yet win that franchise over. And I don't know if Disney is in talks with Universal as far as getting the full rights, you know, or what have you. I think, in my personal opinion, Disney really should try to possibly, you know, try to make accommodations with the Universal if they haven't already. But in the meantime, they really should focus on using a lot of that newer technology, primarily of how they use in the international parks.
Right.
Because when you look at a lot of these attractions at the international parks, they are so mind-blowing. I mean, the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction alone in Shanghai,
Oh yeah.
it's like, whoa, it's like, why don't we have that here? And it's,
Right.
you know, and if you can recall going back to a patent that Disney filed, where it was like a pendulum type of ride, where it was like a swinging motion, that I thought that was what was going to be for the Spider-Man ride. And I think that would have been much better than a web slinger attraction, to be honest with you, because it would have gave you the sensation of flying through the air with Spider-Man, jumping maybe like from skyscraper to skyscraper, you know, jumping off of buildings, you know. It gives you that flying sensation. And I think that would have been a better contender to go up against Universal as far as a Spider-Man attraction goes.
Yeah.
But I think it's more so, but we'll definitely have to wait and see. I think Disney may be wanting to see how Avengers Campus appeals to guests, because I think if it's a big enough hit, then they could say, hey, this is a brand that we can move forward with.
Yeah.
You know, something that we can push forward with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And I have two completely different opinions on the Marvel and the Simpsons IP. Now, when it comes to Marvel, it's kind of interesting. I think that Disney's desire to acquire the Marvel theme park rights from Universal is sort of on the same level as Disney's desire to build a third park in Anaheim, where it's basically like they want to do it. That's the end game, no pun intended. That's the end game, but it's not a priority. It can wait, because I feel like Disney, when they really, really want something, you know it. Look at the approach that Disney took with buying Fox. They did not. I mean, it was aggressive. I mean, Comcast went in and bid. They were not going to let Comcast get that studio. You know, they spent $75 billion on Fox. They hell or high water, Disney was going to get that studio. And I don't feel like they're having that same level of aggression and push to acquire the Marvel rights for the theme parks. And I think mostly that's because every other resort in the world can basically use Marvel however they want. And even Florida, while they're restricted, they can still use it. Like, you guys are getting Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. And a lot of the future MCU stuff is going to rely less and less on those core characters that you would see in Islands of Adventure. So they're moving away from, like, you know, Captain America and Thor and all that, and they're going more into the more kind of the weird stuff, like with Eternals and things like that, which they can use freely in Florida because they're not in the Universal parks. So I think they want to do it. I just don't think it's a priority. I think eventually they'll offer Universal something in exchange for it and ultimately get those rights. Because also remember, Universal's hands are tied now. They can't really do anything except for beautify and maintain what they currently have. So it's kind of, from Universal's perspective, it's kind of a dead land. They can't add anything to it. So it's kind of in their best interest eventually to also kind of see the rights, I think.
And I think Disney knows that, and I agree with you. I think they're just kind of sitting back waiting for Universal to make the first move. And I think it's another notion of, as you said, in Florida, we are getting Cosmic Rewind, and you guys out there are getting the Avengers Campus. So I think it's more so that they're pretty much pacing themselves because they don't want to turn all of the Disney parks with everything Marvel, so they're only going to kind of pick anyway. But do you think that it's more so that Disney would want to acquire the full brand of rights of Marvel just because Universal has a little touch of it? Just to, not saying to be greedy, but more like of a competition type of thing, because they've been rivals in that sense to, get as many guests through their gates as possible. So the fact that they currently now have to share a property value that, oh, they're going in there for this attraction, but they're coming over for here for ours. Do you think more so in time that it may push the process just so they know that Universal doesn't have nothing of Marvel in their park?
I'm actually, believe it or not, really torn on that, because part of me says yes, they absolutely don't like Universal having the Marvel property because Disney is very brand conscious. They want their brand on their property only, exclusively, right? So that part of me is saying, yeah, they want to grab it from Universal. But there's another part of me that says, well, not so fast. When someone goes to Universal and they buy Simpsons merch or they buy Marvel merch, Disney gets a check. They still get paid when people spend money at Universal. So it's almost like it's not that bad of a situation either. So I don't know. I don't really know internally where they stand with that, because they're still making money even when people go to Universal. You know what I'm saying? So I'm completely torn on that.
And a perfect way to describe it is, speaking of The Simpsons, is it reminds me like if Disney, if this would be a meme, you'd see Mr. Burns kind of like twiddling his fingers going, excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of The Simpsons, I agree with you. I think you hit the nail on the head with The Simpsons, where like they wanted The Simpsons for the streaming stuff. It's a hugely popular show. From what I understand, it's still one of the most popular pieces of content on Disney Plus. I mean, The Simpsons are a juggernaut on Disney Plus. Okay, so I think that's why they wanted it. But in terms of theme park, I don't think Disney's interested in theme park stuff for Simpsons. Like, I think they're fine with it just being like a Disney Plus streaming thing. And I'll be real with you, and this isn't like a knock on Universal, because I enjoy the Springfield stuff to some degree. But The Simpsons is one of those things where I enjoy watching it, but it's not like an environment or world that I was dying to visit. Like, I never watched The Simpsons growing up going, wow, I wish I could visit Springfield. I just never did. It's just like I love Family Guy, but I have no desire to visit Quahog. It's a sitcom. So I don't know. I don't think it's as theme park worthy.
I can agree with you with that, because it's one of those things where, like, even if you were to have a meet and greet with the characters have like that warm compassion where they give you a hug, they sign your autograph book.
Yeah.
If someone were to do that with The Simpsons, I can't picture that, because they have that satire, that slapstick type of comedy. Like, I can't like picture a kid wanting to hug Homer, it's like, and they do, but it's just like, it feels out of place. Like it doesn't feel like, and not to Disney's fault at all, but I really think that if Disney did acquire the rights to Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling did agree to it, of them having a meet and greet, to that same notion, I can't foresee the Harry Potter franchise characters meeting and greeting people. Like, it's almost like, because in their world, they stay away from Muggles.
Right.
So it's like, then you have this line full of people that, it's like, to me, it just feels like it's out of place. So I think to a certain degree, Harry Potter fits more for Universal than it would have for Disney.
Absolutely.
Just because Disney has that warm-hearted feeling of, character meet and greets and moving into these immersive lands, which, don't get me wrong, Harry Potter is very immersive.
Oh, yeah.
But it's almost like you have to have that lightning in a bottle, even like with Pandora. Pandora as the land itself is perfect. It's beautiful. It fits well in Animal Kingdom. But I can't foresee them having 7-foot Na'vi characters walking around greeting guests. Like
Right.
it just wouldn't fit right to me.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's kind of good in a way to like. I'm glad that Universal got Harry Potter, because I feel like I don't, as much as I love Disney, and that's where my heart is. I don't want Disney to have complete control of every single popular IP known to man. I do think it's good to have a little competition, and I do think it's good for Universal to have some of that pie. And I just feel like if Disney had Potter on top of Marvel, on top of Star Wars, on top of Disney and Pixar and everything else under the sun, it's just too much. You know, I think it's good Universal has some of these other brands to kind of, it just creates a little more competition. So it was definitely a good thing that Potter went over to Universal for sure.
Absolutely.
You know? So let's dive into question number 2. And thank you, Edward, for that question. That was a fantastic, fantastic question.
Anytime we can get like full in depth with a question, it's a good one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's go ahead and we got another one. And this one is from Kermit the Bog. No relation to Kermit the Frog, by the way. So Kermit is asking, do you think people will feel Marvel fatigue with all the new movies and shows on Disney Plus? What are your thoughts on that, George?
Well, I think as of right now, I don't think people would be Marvel fatigue just because people were craving Marvel when Disney Plus first premiered. Mm-hmm. And it was like all these new shows and all these this new content. And it's like, here's November 12th, Disney Plus premieres. And it's like, okay, where's Marvel at? We got absolutely like almost nothing. And then when WandaVision came out, it was like kablam. It was like, okay, this is what we were waiting for. And now I have to admit that since The Falcon and the Winter Soldier premiered, I did watch the first 2 episodes. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of it. I like it, but it's something that I don't really need. You know, it's just like one of those things. It almost feels like this show is a fill-in for people to kind of, you know, calm down from WandaVision, but get hyped up for Loki, you know? So it's like one of those notions. It's still a very good show. It's very interesting, but to me, it's just another, you know, Captain America type of rounded material that, you know, we've seen before in many of the films, where with WandaVision, it was completely out of left field, something completely different. We didn't know which way it was going. You know, when I saw the previews at the D23 Expo, I thought, and part of my French, what the hell is this? What are we doing here? And I literally thought I wasn't going to like WandaVision. Yeah. And I absolutely loved it. I could not wait every Friday for a new episode to come out. So I think, to actually answer the question, I think right now, I don't think people would be too Marvel fatigue right now, but I think that, you know, as long as Disney does it well, and sort of like as one ends, another one begins, it has like that constant flow. I think if they were to release them all at once, it would be like brain overload, you know, like give a person, you know, some time. And I think of how Disney could do it is after The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, after Loki, then give it a little break. Take a little break, and then bring out a new slate of maybe like 3 more series or a movie and a show or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Like, okay, here's the thing. Yeah. And I agree with you on WandaVision. That show blew my mind. I love WandaVision. It was completely, I wasn't sold on the concept either. I was completely like, this is too weird for me. And then I saw it and I was instantly hooked, and it became one of my favorite things that Marvel has ever done. I'm not even joking. I absolutely adored it. But in terms of Marvel fatigue, I don't really buy into fatigue of any franchise. Like, a lot of people kind of threw around Star Wars fatigue for a while. Like, there's Star Wars fatigue. People are tired of it. I don't think people grow tired of franchises as long as you're creating content that they like. So as long as Marvel continues to create movies and shows that fans are into, I think there'll always be that market for it. Like for example, like when Star Wars, when Solo came out and it bombed at the box office, a lot of people attributed that to Star Wars fatigue. And I disagree. I think people just weren't into that movie because even a year later or a year and so later, The Mandalorian was like the biggest hit they've ever had, right? It was a huge hit. So I find it hard to believe that there was fatigue in 2008, but then 2019, suddenly the fatigue went away and people were back on board. I just think it comes down to the content. If it's good quality content, I think people will continue to see it. Marvel has kind of proven themselves with that. They've continued to show that they've done great content and will continue to turn it out. As long as they continue with the quality stuff, I think they'll be good, you know?
Yeah, I definitely can understand that because for me, I was a fan of Solo. I loved it. It's actually, as far as like a Star Wars movie, it's one of my favorites, believe it or not, aside from the original. And I just think that it was released just at a bad time. And I think it was more so that people already went into the theater expecting a very crappy movie. So it's like they did it to themselves. And then after that, they just kind of had that bitter pill taste for Star Wars. And I think that's where the Kylo Ren and Rey saga suffered from it because of with Solo. And it was like, no matter what you do, it's like you couldn't please them. It's like no matter what curveball you throw them, no matter how you change it, no matter how much you keep it the same, it's like, oh, it's too much the same or it's too different. Change this. It's like you can't please everyone.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. And I actually like Solo too. I actually really like Solo. I absolutely loved Enfy's Nest. I thought that character was really fantastic. I would love to see more of her. The thing is too, is I feel kind of bad for, was it Aldrin Ehrenreich, I believe his name was, the actor?
So. Yes.
I feel bad for him because I think he did a good job. But I think it's extremely big shoes to fill. I mean, you're trying to follow up Harrison Ford, like how do you do that? And there really isn't a person on the planet that I think could really do it and be 100% accepted in the fandom. It's just extremely hard. And I think he did the very, very best that he could. And I liked him in the role, and I loved Donald Glover as Lando. I thought he hit the nail on the head with that. But it was a fun movie. Absolutely. But yeah, in terms of fatigue, I think as long as Marvel just continues to hit home runs and do quality stuff, I think people will be okay with it. I think people will be fine and continue to consume it. I mean, Marvel, look, I mean, the MCU has been around for what, over a decade now? Mm-hmm. And it's still just as popular as it was a few years ago. I think people are on board at this point. I mean,
yeah. And as far as like with the comment, like of, filling the shoes with Harrison Ford, that's just like with Indiana Jones. If you were to get anyone to replace a younger Indiana Jones, it's like, I think you're already kind of setting yourself up for that criticism, because it's Harrison Ford.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it was so smart for them, for Lucasfilm, for Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni to put, to have Mark Hamill play Luke Skywalker in the Mandalorian finale and just de-age him. Because if you would have put somebody else in there, even if you put someone like Sebastian Stan, which fans have been really clamoring for, there still would have been that divide, I think. Yeah. Having Mark play that role, I think was the right move. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. So Kermit the Bog, thank you so much for that question. I do appreciate it. And the next question comes from, let's see here. So the last and final question. All right, comes from CSRS, and CSRS always asks really great questions. This is another good one from CSRS. So they're asking two-pronged question. Number one, what Marvel shows are you looking forward to the most on Disney Plus? So let's tackle that question first, and then we'll move on to the number two. So George, what are you looking forward to, like for like the Marvel content on Disney Plus going forward? What are your most anticipated shows?
Well, I definitely could say I was not looking forward to WandaVision until I actually saw it. So, because it was, again, it just caught me by surprise. But from the get-go, when Disney Plus was, in talks, and they had this idea of what was going to go on it, and when they pitched the ideas for the Marvel content, and Loki was going to get his own series, I was immediately on board. I was like, I don't care what it was. I don't care what the storyline is. I don't care who else is in it, as long as Tom is still Loki. It's like, and then when they released the teaser trailers for them, it was like, oh my gosh, it's like, now I really have to see this. So it's like, it's a buildup of anticipation. And I'm wondering too, if that's why I'm really not too much of a hype for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It's just because I know what's going to come next. So it's like, I want to kind of get through this series so I can get to Loki.
Yeah, I am really, really looking forward to Loki. And actually, the trailer pleasantly surprised me. I love Loki, the character, but for some reason, and I don't know why, this is to my own fault, when they announced the Loki show, I assumed it was going to be kind of a slapsticky, almost a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of energy. And then I saw the trailer, and it was super dark. And I'm like, wow. Yeah, and I'm like, wow, I'm on board with this. This looks really dope. I cannot wait for Loki. So Loki is one of my top things. I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm also looking forward to She-Hulk. I'm really curious how they're going to tackle that character. I'm really excited for that series.
Yeah, I think I'm more so interested in She-Hulk just as you are. It's like one of those things, like, I don't really know too much about it, but it's like, I'm intrigued, So when they kind of give like the concept of it, it's like, okay, well, tell me more. You gave me a bite of the apple. I want the whole apple. Like, let me know, like, what is this about?
Yeah, and Moon Knight is another one which sounds phenomenal. Marvel has so much on the horizon. It's like insane. There's like almost too much to even like wrap my head around.
Absolutely, it's. Because at the D23 Expo, they were just throwing them out there. It was just like how much more do we have? It's like, I thought literally they weren't going to stop. I thought the whole rest of the presentation was just going to be all Marvel, which wouldn't have been a bad thing.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then there's Captain Marvel 2, Ms. Marvel. I am very interested of how they're going to do with Black Panther 2, because they had announced that they are still going to do it, but they're not going to replace Chad, which I'm glad. No one should have to replace him, but it's going to be, I think more so his sister will then take on the Panther suit.
Oh, and I love Shuri. She is awesome. And she's one of my favorite characters in that movie. So I didn't even hear that. I didn't even know that. That's pretty awesome news that she's going to kind of take the mantle. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they're looking more into, rather than kind of do like a digitalized Chad. I think they said they were going to play on more of the comics, where eventually she did take over her brother's suit. So I think they're kind of pushing forward with that for her to become the new Black Panther.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool. Very much. Yeah, Marvel has a ton of stuff. Like right now, Loki, I think when Loki drops in June, right? I believe.
I think it's June. Yes.
Okay. So we don't have too much time, because this will probably be, I think Falcon and Winter Soldier is like 6 weeks. So that'll probably bring us to like May something. And then we'll probably get, or close to May. And then we'll have like a month, and then Loki comes. That's not too bad.
Yeah. Yeah. That's more so how Marvel's doing it. And I think it's very interesting, because I think Disney kind of learned that from Star Wars, is because they had Mandalorian season 1, long break, and then season 2, and then we're not getting nothing for a whole year, either with Mandalorian season 3 or the Book of Boba Fett. So it's like, I think Marvel has a nice continuous flow of when they're releasing their content, and I actually prefer that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that. So let's tackle number 2 on CSRS's question, where they're saying, while this next part is not Disney related, but what are your thoughts on Paramount Plus? What are your feelings on that, George? Paramount Plus.
I briefly had Paramount Plus because I had the CBS app and I had the subscription to it. Unfortunately, that I ended my subscription, but after they took the payment out, so I had one more month left.
That's how they get you, George. That's how they get you.
Yep. They took the payment out, so it was like they gave me one more month free, but it was nice because that was during the time of the transition from CBS to Paramount Plus. So I got a little taste of what Paramount Plus was. I think it's okay. It's not a bad subscription to subscribe to if you want to keep it. I may get it back in the future. They have a lot of like with Comedy Central and a lot of that classic Nickelodeon and Nick Jr., which actually I do love to the fact because growing up as a 90s kid on Paramount Plus, they have Rugrats, Real Monsters, Rocko's Modern Life, Kenan and Kel, all that, so they have that 90s Doug, they have like those shows that I grew up with as a kid. And to briefly go back to those and reminisce, it was like, it takes me back to my childhood. So at that part, I do appreciate from Paramount Plus. But other than that, it's no Disney Plus. Disney Plus is still number one to me as far as all the streaming services go.
Yeah, there's a lot that Paramount has that like nostalgia wise for me, a lot of the Nickelodeon shows. And I don't know if this is on Paramount Plus or not, but like Legends of the Hidden Temple, Guts,
I wish see now if they had Legends of the Hidden Temple and Guts and Double Dare 2000, yes, I would have kept that subscription.
Oh, so they don't have it then?
No, they don't have it. Yeah.
See, yeah, get on board with that. If they had those shows, I would be more inclined. The thing with Paramount is that a lot of stuff, at least that I associate it with, is stuff that like, I don't know, like MTV, I'm kind of like not that age group anymore for MTV, right. Yeah. So I don't really care about it. I'm on board with Indiana Jones. I know that Paramount owns the rights to Indiana Jones, the film, so that's cool. Mm-hmm. But like SpongeBob and like all that stuff, like I'm just not really. Yeah,
as I said, it was nice. It took me back to my childhood, but it's not something that I could literally say for them to charge me each month.
Right.
That I would be satisfied to keep.
Exactly. Now, I love like crime dramas and detective stuff. And from what I understand, I think CSI is on that platform.
If I can recall, I think it is. Yes.
Yeah. So that would be something that I would be interested in. But yeah, like it's cool. They do have some decent content. I just don't know if it's enough because I already have a Netflix. I already have a Disney Plus. I don't know if I want to add I don't know if Paramount Plus offers me enough personally to warrant one more subscription, Yes.
Now, piggybacking off of that, and I'm saying this out to Disney. I'm saying this directly for Disney Plus. Speaking of content, I don't know how much that I have to keep on repeating it, but I will keep on repeating it until they get it on there. I need to see, as much as I love to see new content coming from Disney Plus, from Marvel, from Lucasfilm, from Pixar, what have you, all these new movies coming out from Walt Disney Animation and Disney Live Action. I love it. But it's also nice to go back once in a while and just relive your childhood with that originality and nostalgic, moment. I want to see Dumbo Circus. I want to see Under the Umbrella Tree. I want to see Adventures in Wonderland. I want to see Pooh Corner. I want to go back to those 80s, 90s shows that may look corny now. Kids today will look at that and say, what is this? It's like, but for me, it was a big deal. It was, it was part of my childhood. And Disney said that they're putting every piece of Disney content on there. Everything in the vault is going on there. So I'm holding Disney to that. I really want to see those shows on there.
Well, I have good news for you. I did hear a few weeks ago that Adventures in Wonderland was confirmed for Disney Plus, I believe for April.
Okay.
Yeah, which I am excited for because I I'm not a 90s kid. I mean, I'm more of an 80s kid, but I was still young enough in the 90s where I absolutely adored the shows that you mentioned, like Adventures in Wonderland and all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, and you know what? Bring Mickey Mouse Club too, the 90s
Yes.
Mickey Mouse Club.
Yes. And honestly, that does give me high hopes that you say that, because if they are going to release Adventures in Wonderland, then it was on the same time block as Pooh Corner, Dumbo Circus, Under the Umbrella Tree, the Mickey Mouse Club. They were all on that kind of same time block with the original Disney Channel. So if they're going to start off with Adventures of Wonderland, that's fine. So that just gives me high hopes. But I'm not going to hold my breath just yet until I actually see it on there, because I'm still I was so excited to see the World's Fair documentary with Disney, and I still don't know what happened to that.
Yeah, no, yeah, that was supposed to come. It was almost a year ago. I remember it was supposed to be released around May of last year. Never happened. Yeah. Still, now it's almost April. Well, it is April of 2021, a year later almost, and we still haven't seen it. So I don't know what happened with that either. That's really, really odd.
Yeah, but hopefully in time, maybe we'll still get it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So that concludes this Q&A. I want to thank George, the DisneyFamilyman23, for coming on. And again, watch our discussion with Mr. Vash Sky. Again, the links are after this video for part 1 and 2. It was incredible. But George, go ahead and tell everyone at home where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. Well, again, my name is George, also known as DisneyFamilyman23. Please check out my channel. As Orange Grove had mentioned, we had a nice, lengthy conversation yesterday. It's in 3 parts. Part 1 and 2 is already out. Part 3 will be tomorrow. You could also listen on my podcast, the Grand Circle Tour podcast, with many other Disney enthusiasts on Stitcher, on iTunes, and YouTube. You could also find me on Instagram and on Twitter at DisneyGeorge.
Perfect. Thank you, George, for coming on. I do appreciate it. And thank you all for watching. And if you have a question for a future Q&A, just go to the community tab. Under any of the Q&A posts, just post your question, and maybe your question will be on a future Q&A. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.